My brother-in-law died suddenly, and now my sister and her kids have to sell their home. That's why I told my husband we could not put off getting life insurance any longer. An agent offered us a 10-year, $500,000 policy for nearly $50 a month. Then we called SelectQuote. SelectQuote found us identical coverage for only $19 a month, a savings of $369 a year.
Whether you need a $500,000 policy or a $5 million policy, SelectQuote could save you more than 50% on term life insurance.
For your free quote, go to SelectQuote.com. SelectQuote.com. That's SelectQuote.com.
SelectQuote. We shop. You save. Full details on example policies at SelectQuote.com/commercials.
Hello there, writers and book lovers. If you enjoy listening to the show and want to help me keep creating awesome content, I have a Patreon page where you can support the podcast and get exclusive access to ad-free episodes, live chats, and the Discord server. By becoming a patron, you'll be helping me cover the costs of producing the show and making it even better. So if you can, please head over to the Patreon page and join the community of Right and Wrong fans who are helping to take the show to the next level. Thank you for listening and for your support. Let's get back to it.
So our podcast is called Right and Wrong.
Are these your notes?
These
Are these your notes about what we're going to say?
Anything.
Nailed it.
Yes, the short answer.
So how many novels did you not finish?
Oh my God, so many.
It was perfect. What's she talking about? This is nonsense.
Ooh, a spicy question. I love it.
This is it, guys. The big secret to getting published is you have to write a good book. You heard it here first. Hello, and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by best-selling, award-winning historical fiction writer and occasional poet, Angela Petch. Hi, Angela. Welcome to the show.
Oh, hello. Thanks for asking me to come and chat.
Oh,
Or waffle. Yes. I hope it won't be waffle.
I love a bit of waffle. That's what we're all here for. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
So let's talk about your work. You have, am I right in thinking it's 7 published novels now?
I think so. I should be more efficient in time than this. It's going to be 7, I think, very soon.
Yeah.
I've got 6.
Okay. So it's the 4 Tuscany books.
I've got 3 Tuscany books.
3 Tuscany books.
I'm using my fingers here. And then I've got 3 others that are set elsewhere in Italy.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they are all set in Italy.
Yes. I am very lucky because I lived in Italy for 6 months each year. And I lived there as a child. So I speak Italian quite well. And I've got a degree in Italian. And I'm married to a half Italian as well. So, okay. And his mother is Italian. She's still alive. And he has to go every year, and I don't mind trailing after him. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty nice going over to, is it Tuscany as well? I'm going to guess.
It is Tuscany, but it's not what we rather snobbily call Chianti-shire, because we're in a very unspoilt corner of Tuscany, the eastern side, where people don't really tend to go. I call it the real Italy, and up in the mountains, so it gets very cold in the winter. Because people ask us why we do it the way we do. They say, "Why don't you go to Italy to be warm in the winter?" And at the moment, you can get down to -15. It snowed last week there, and my friends got snowed in. So we don't do it that way around.
Yeah, I mean, that's colder than here in the UK.
Exactly.
Oh, I didn't realize it was like that. So what is it about? Is it just this sort of love of this deep connection you have that makes you want to write all of your stories in Italy?
Well, I suppose I've always thought that it was, when you live in England, it's not quite as exciting as living in Italy, but it's more than that. There's a connection with my mother-in-law, Italian mother-in-law, who unfortunately has Alzheimer's now, but she used to tell us quite a lot about her life in Italy during the war, when she actually married a British army captain. They met at a dance that neither of them was supposed to be at. and fell in love, even though they couldn't speak each other's language. And so she's had a very interesting life, and it just found out that when we moved to this part of Italy, we discovered an old watermill going very cheaply, and we bought it over 20 years ago. We realised that it was along something called the Gothic Line, which was a line of defence that the Germans built to stop the Allies going northwards. And so, because it's such an unspoilt part of Italy, there's lots of trenches and gun emplacements and remains of the war. Plus, speaking to the elderly, I discovered that I could find out more. I was fascinated by that period and link it to my mother-in-law's story. So it started like that, really. I never imagined I would write a book. I was just writing down her experiences. And then somebody said to me, why don't you publish it? So it went from there.
Okay, so I mean, as you're saying it, I can see a lot of the inspiration for your stories, many of which are set around the kind of World War II period.
Yeah, the second one wasn't that I wrote. It was set that was sparked off by an interest in something called the transhumance, which I had never heard of, and we went on an outing with some other Italians down to the sea. And they were going on a kind of annual celebratory transumanza festa. And what the people from our area, because I explained it was very cold, they used to take, the shepherds and the herdsmen used to take animals down to the coast every year because it was just too hard in the winter. But the men were away for a good 5 months of the year, leaving the women and children in the mountains. And that just sparked off my imagination. And I did loads of research on that. And I was quite surprised when Bookouture wanted to publish that. It was self-published because it's more like, to my mind, a bit of a social history. But they have published it. It hasn't sold as many as my other books, but I'm very proud of that book. And originally I had photographs in it. They weren't brilliant quality because I don't know, I self-published it and I was sort of feeling my way about, but I enjoyed writing that a lot.
Well, that's great. I mean, I always say to people, no matter what stage in the process you are, you need to be enjoying what you're writing.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, it's sort of like, why are you doing this?
Yeah. Well, if you don't enjoy it, it won't come over as being enjoyable, and the reader won't enjoy it. So, I think you have to be careful not to become formulaic.
Mm-hmm.
But then balance that with the fact that the books are selling, and it's quite nice to receive royalties. But life's a bit short for doing stuff you don't want to do.
Yes, I know what you mean. Okay, so you mentioned both Bookouture and self-publishing. So where did this begin for you? Your first book, was that self-published?
Yeah, my first 2 books were self-published.
Okay.
I always wonder whether I should say indie published. I think people prefer to say indie published now, don't they? But I indie published those, and I didn't know what I was doing really. The first I used, I suppose, what would be called a vanity publisher first. I had no idea, and I ended up paying this company, I think, £300, and they produced the book, but they didn't do any editing at all. And I was horrified when I got the copy back because they'd already published it, and it was full of mistakes.
Oh no!
And eventually, that company went bankrupt, and I lost my royalties, the few royalties that I had, and I decided to then self-publish with KDP. And again, feeling my way. I mean, I didn't sell many, but it felt fantastic to have my book in my hands. So that first book has gone through actually 3 different titles. The third one, and then Bookouture published it for me. I was with another publisher, and they went into voluntary liquidation. So it's all been a bit of an ordeal in a way.
Yeah. Sounds like it. Sounds like it's been a real roller coaster of sort of like up, down.
Yes, yeah. And I'm not very technical, and I'm quite proud of myself when I think back to how I formatted everything and made the covers and everything myself.
Yeah.
And there were lots of things wrong, but people seem to enjoy reading them. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So you're now working with Bookouture. How did that come about? Did you submit your work to them?
Well, I had been accepted by another company, the one that went into voluntary liquidation.
Yeah.
And I'd heard of Bookouture, so I submitted to Bookouture, and they're very good. They read everything, and the editor, who I've actually got now, she wrote back almost immediately and said it's not quite what we're looking for. So I would go with the other company. And then I was with the other company. I'm not mentioning any names. They didn't edit either. They just did not do any editing. And they went into voluntary liquidation. And then my editor got back in touch with me not long afterwards and said, "Oh, what about that book? What are you doing with it? Have you sent it to somebody else? Because we're interested now." And I said, "Well, no, I'm not. Not doing anything with it." I felt burnt, really.
Yeah.
And also, I'd had a peculiar episode where I lost my memory. We had a lot of stress, and I lost my memory totally for about 4 hours and ended up in hospital. And they told me this was due to stress. So I said to my lovely editor that I've got now, I don't want to publish it, but she convinced me, and I've been with them since. So up and down is the right word. I think.
Wow.
It was very scary. Actually, I could have done anything in those 4 hours. I could have committed a murder and not realised what I was doing.
Well, that sounds like a different genre of novel.
I know. There. I've thought about trying something along those lines.
So Bookouture is not a traditional publisher. What's from like the author perspective? What's the process like working with Bookouture?
It's amazing having done the indie publishing before and knowing how hard it is to do the marketing, especially for somebody like me who's not savvy, who went on to Twitter and not realizing that if I put in my description of myself that I was a lover of anything Italian, and then being besieged by lots of bare-chested men in the feed, that sort of thing. So here I am waffling. They are extremely diligent about the editing. It was amazing. And they do the marketing for you. They want you to write. So I don't have to worry about buying Amazon ads or just being constantly bombarding people. I'm quite good at engaging with people on social media, but I don't have to be at it all the time. I can concentrate on the writing. I feel safe with them because of all the processes of editing, from the structural edits, which I find the hardest because you've got to sometimes change the book about, and it's add and subtract, and then the line edits and the copy edits, and then the final. It's very rigorous. I can't choose the cover. That was a difficult thing at first, because having produced my own covers with kind of from personal photographs, but I found it quite hard because I didn't feel that sometimes the covers completely mirrored my book, but then I don't know how to sell like they sell. So, it was a big learning curve. But I do feel very safe with them. and I do trust my editor. And so I've got nothing but good to say about Bookouture.
That's great. And I mean, a very similar sentiment to I had last year. I had Angela Marsons on the podcast,
Yes,
who's also Bookouture.
I think she's amazingly successful and a lovely person. Yes.
Yes, I mean, she's on. Well, last time I spoke to her, she was on a 12-book deal. So it's a long relationship they're going to have, Bookouture and her.
Yeah, I think she's very happy. The thought of having to write 12 books, though, to me, I have to remember my little episode. And that's another thing that they're very good at. They're very understanding. You just feel they're real people and not just somebody at the end of a line who's just totting up the figures. They obviously are business people, but they're like a family.
Am I right in thinking Bookouture don't do in the same way that traditional publishers do advances? Bookouture just don't do advances.
No, they don't do advances. Adding on to what I've just said, I suppose, being vain, it would be so wonderful to be able to go into a bookshop like Waterstones and see my books there. I think my books are in bookshops in America, and that they have them translated. They've had them translated as well into Italian, which is amazing, and they're available in bookshops and in France as well, and in Hungary. So, but that's the only thing. I've only seen my book for sale in a charity shop, and I didn't really quite know what to make of that. Second hand, somebody who was clearing their shelves.
Yeah. So Bookouture is it's digital first.
Digital first, but they do paperbacks and audiobooks as well, and that's fun. Hearing your book being read.
Yeah, but the paperbacks, as you say, are not going to be in the sort of high street bookshops. They order on. You have to order them online.
Yes, I think. I see. I'm not very savvy. I think if you wanted a local bookshop to stock your books, you could arrange for that, and people can order the book from a bookshop, but they're not going to be on a table in the front of the shop. Yeah.
So
Harry's book.
Yeah, well.
Oh yes, no more. No comment.
Yes. I asked other Angela Marsons because, like you, at Bookouture, very happy at Bookouture, but does not have an agent. Have you looked into literary agents? Are you at all interested in getting an agent?
No, and I can't see the point now because they'd be getting a bit of my money, wouldn't they? I've managed to do it without. And I suppose, if I started quite late on this, I've got 3 children and I'm sort of an old-fashioned mum. I stayed at home also because my husband worked abroad a lot, so it was quite difficult to have a career as such and fit in with his job. So I concentrated on the children and didn't start writing until I was in my late 50s. So I think it would be very different if I was younger and this was a vital source of income. But it isn't. I'm old. I'm retired, and so I can afford not to treat it as an important income.
Yeah, but I mean, like you said, you have an established working relationship with Bookouture. Everything seems to be going well.
Yes,
having an agent would just mean that. They wouldn't have anything to do because you already have the deal set up. So,
well, I think the thing is that Bookouture want you to write and not to have to worry about other stuff. I suppose that's what an agent does. I don't know. I've never looked into having an agent because I never really believed I would be published. I really didn't. It's been such a joy, and I still pinch myself. And people say, but you've sold hundreds of thousands of books, and you should go on about it. But it's not my character, and I still feel it's a bit of a dream, and I want it to be like that because I don't want it to become something of a grind.
Yeah, I get that, because it's something you love and you want to kind of protect it in that way.
Yeah. I want to love writing. I don't want to think, oh gosh, I've got to write.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really healthy way of looking at it. You alluded to it earlier, that you do have a new book coming out soon that I don't think has been announced yet. Can you tell us anything about it?
Oh, stop me if I get boring. So my husband's family, Italian family, have featured a bit in my books, and his grandfather, Luigi, who is going to be Luigi in my book, was really anti-fascist, and he helped the partisans during the war, and he also rescued the lives of many Jews. He's from a city called Urbino, which is probably not as well known as other places like Florence or Siena, but it's a beautiful, beautiful city next to Tuscany in the region called Le Marche. And I got married there and know it quite well. And he was so modest. We had not realized until after he died the extent of his involvement with the partisans. And we found a box of his letters and papers in a pile that was going to be thrown away. We found a medal in there that he had been awarded with by the Italian government for being an active partisan. And so I just felt this had to be written about. And so I'm excited about it. I hope people will enjoy reading it. And that's going to be coming out in April. I have seen the title and I have seen the cover, but it's not in the public domain yet, so I can't really tell you anything about that. But my husband's very pleased that I've written it. But I mean, obviously, whenever he talks about his grandfather and how modest he was about what he did, tears come into his eyes. So I'm quite anxious that I do this subject justice. The other thing, Italians are so amazingly generous, hospitable, human. Went to the main Jewish museum in Ferrara, and I couldn't find any of the facts that I discovered on display, because the Italians saved the lives of 80% of the Jews during the war. And that's an amazingly high statistic when you compare with the fact that in the rest of Europe, 80% of Jews lost their lives. So, and I said to the manageress, there's nothing about this in your museum. You've got all the films about the Holocaust and the way Jews were not allowed to go to school and work, but there's nothing about how ordinary Italians saved the lives of so many Jews. And it was almost as if, well, isn't that what everybody does? So that's in my book. I've tried to put over this fact. I hope I've managed to do it. Yeah, we shall see.
It sounds very personal, so and very sort of close to your heart and your family's heart. So I'm sure it'll be really lovely when it comes out. It's interesting that it's coming out in April, and we're recording this in March, and the cover and sort of title still have not been fully finalized. Really just shows you the difference in pace between traditional publishing and Bookouture's sort of digital first approach, because traditional publishing, that cover would have been announced like months and months ago, with the title would have been confirmed and locked in. So it's so interesting to see the difference in pace.
Yeah, it's not to say that they drag their heels once the book's out, or drag their heels with getting translation rights and film rights. Wouldn't that be nice one day? But they have got film rights for some of their books.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's happened, actually. It's normally they would have stuck to the date, but that I don't know. It's all good. I'm not worried.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I'm amazed that things can change so close to the deadline in like a positive way. You know, it shows you how quick digital first can work versus obviously when you're going kind of mass printing published physical copies, you can't afford to be, you can't change things. Like you have to be committed to something. And I think it's kind of a testament to digital first that you can do things like that.
Yeah, lots of people say they don't like reading on Kindle or whatever e-form. I used to be like that, but it's so handy, isn't it? It really is. When we travel back and forward to Italy, we have to have my books and my packets of tea, but the books take up so much room. We sort of put them underneath the spare wheel, and
they become the furniture, right?
They become the furniture, yes.
Yeah. And I tell you, as a fantasy reader, I love to have a massive like tome of a book, but trying to read them sort of back to, like, it's exhausting reading a giant book that I can't hold it up. I have to like rest it on something. So having it every now and again, just putting something on a Kindle is just so easy. So
it could be quite injurious and painful, these big books, because I read in bed as well. And there's nothing more annoying when you want to read on and your eyes keep closing and then your book falls on your nose. Well, the bigger the book, the bigger the bruise on your nose. Yeah,
I mean, and anyone listening who knows the size of Brandon Sanderson's books, I read those in their entirety. If I fell asleep, that would knock me out. Really. I'd have a big bruise on my forehead probably and wake up in the morning. But getting back to you, do you, you've been writing for a while now. Do you have any sort of like writing rituals or routines that or something maybe that you sort of can't write without?
Well, I have to write indoors, really. Sometimes I get airy-fairy and I take a notepad and pencil to the river, because we live near the river in Italy, but I can't concentrate there. And so I prefer to write in the morning. I have my back to the window so I can't be distracted by anything going on out there, and I can't write with music on at all. I suppose I have to have the music in my head, really.
Yeah.
I set myself a word count, because otherwise I can find too many other things to do. Like I baked a cake this morning. I could have gone on and done something else. I don't know. So I have a word count, have to have quiet and no distraction. Then it's easier to sort of enter into the world that you're creating.
Yeah.
Well, it is for me anyway. So
no, that makes a lot of sense. And but before we do the final question, you had let's say a bumpy ride through sort of publishing, going between different publishers and publishers folding and things like that. If you could go back in time before you kind of first got into the publishing world, what advice would you give yourself?
Goodness. Right. Well, first, I often think, what would it have been like if I'd been younger when I started writing? But then I think, well, if I'd been younger, I probably wouldn't have had as much to write about. I wouldn't have had the life experiences. So I suppose I'm saying that don't force yourself to do something unless your heart tells you to do it. Oh gosh, this is such a difficult question, Jamie. I can usually waffle on. I'd have never done I did a degree in Italian. I sometimes think, gosh, if I'd done English and Italian as minor, maybe I could have written something more literary. I don't know. I'm not giving you an answer, really. My advice would be just go with the flow. And I haven't really looked into the commercial side of it for myself, but I'm quite happy for other people to do that with me and get their royalties.
Okay.
I haven't answered your question very well, have I?
You've answered lots of other questions though, so that's good. That's great. I mean, I think
just write, and then
just write.
Then see what happens. And people liked what I'd written. I wrote short stories as well, and I've had them published in magazines, and so that gave me more confidence. Yes, I suppose that's a sensible thing to say to you. Get your confidence up.
Yeah, be confident, but also just kind of, whatever will happen. And these things are not, there's no set path through publishing. There's no, this is how you get a book published and have a successful career in publishing. Amazing. Well, that brings us to the final question, which as always is, Angela, if you were stranded on a desert island with a single book, which book would it be?
Okay, I think people will say it depends. It could change. That answer can change.
Oh, yeah.
What my constant reply to that is Anthony Doerr's book, All the Light We Cannot See, and I've got this copy. I've got in my hands. I must have fallen in the river at some stage because it's got water. It's all bent and curly. Mm-hmm. But I've got 3 copies of this, and it took Anthony Doerr 10 years to write. It's sublime. I've read it during COVID again. I've got little stickers sticking out of it. From the first page, it's just so beautifully written. Each page is like a jewel for me. It's very descriptive. It has a huge message about war. And have you read it at all?
I've not, no.
No. It won the Pulitzer Prize, so can't be bad, can it?
Someone thinks it's good.
No. It's the war seen through the eyes of 2 children. One is a French girl called Marie-Laure, and she's blind. She's experiencing the war through the help of her father, who teaches her how to navigate the streets and find her way home. And she's and her father works in the Museum of Natural History and is in charge of a diamond, which is invaluable. And then the Nazis, a particular Nazi is after this jewel. And then on the other side of it is Werner, who's a German boy who is an orphan, brought up in an orphanage. And they discover that he has a particular talent for putting radios together from bits and bobs that he finds in scrap lying around. And they're 2 very different people. And the book jumps from year to year in no seemingly chronological order, but it all fits in together like an amazingly beautiful jigsaw, and I just think it's charming. And the first chapter, the chapters have all got names to them as well. They're not chapter 1. They're all. The first one is leaflets, but all I'll say is, read it for yourselves. It's very rich. It's not a book that you can read in one sitting. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
Sounds amazing.
Absolutely beautiful imagery in it. I like imagery.
Yeah. Well, it sounds wonderful. It sounds like a really interesting perspective to kind of view those historical events, the war through. Well, thank you so much, Angela, for coming on the podcast and sharing your writing experience and your journey through publishing. It's been really, really great chatting with you.
Thank you, Jamie. And sorry if I waffled on.
That's all right. We love a bit of waffle. And for anyone listening, if you want to keep up with things that Angela is doing and hear about what she's up to, you can follow her on Twitter at Angela_Petch, on Instagram at Angela_Morris, which is Maurice, or on Facebook, you can find her as Angela Petch, author. To make sure you don't miss an episode of this podcast, follow along on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. There's also now a Patreon for exclusive access and content. For more bookish chat, check out my other podcast, The Chosen Ones and Other Tropes. Thanks again to Angela, and thanks to everyone listening. We'll catch you on the next episode.